All right, shall we get started? I think we're all here. So I'm about to do a presentation on the subject of visual programming languages and tools, which is something a bit exotic to bring to a conference such as this, where everybody speaks to each other in C++. But I think if you're here, it's a good sign that you're interested or know something about it and are curious to know more. I'm, as said, from Eggs Design. I'm lead designer there. We focus a lot on professional tools, and professional tools bring specific demands in terms of design and development. So let's look at what I'll be covering. Firstly, a short background in terms of contextualizing how we deal with rapid prototyping as a concept and a method. How I got drawn to visual programming languages, and then I'll be covering the why, the when, and the how of using rapid prototyping in digital design workflows. And then I will dive into real-time prototyping, covering some of the tools worth looking into, focus on one in particular called TouchDesigner, and show some real-world and research examples. I'll be trying to do a few demos. Let's see how that goes. In terms of time, who's it for? Well, developers who might be interested in rapid prototyping for software, who are curious about visual programming languages, interested in learning about multidisciplinary work, because that's how we work at Eggs, with developers, designers, in tandem, who wonder how designers think, if you didn't know already. I think we're wired a bit different, and that's one of the reasons for this talk. Project managers, tech consultants, everyone in between. So let's get to it. Rapid prototyping at Eggs Design. A bit of context. When we talk about design, we usually visualize it using this pyramid of offerings. At one level or at the bottom, you will probably see what is traditionally understood as design, which is form and craft, how things look. But there's much more to it that we deal with. More and more creative problem solving and strategic transformation, which can have quite a wide impact on businesses. And within that, there's a certain number of offerings, and you will see rapid prototyping among form and craft. So what do we call rapid prototyping? It comes from really a term from industrial design, which we do also have. But we call it an economical and pragmatic approach to test and feel your digital or physical product early. We deal with both industrial design and digital and service. And I would just highlight those top words: economical, because it's cheap, and pragmatic, because it's a shortcut to trying out ideas. Testing and feeling, because it's about trying to convey the experience of the final product. But how did I get into visual programming tools and languages? First off, when I was working for projection design, then Barco, and I have a colleague here, Anders, who presented yesterday, or ex-colleague, I started dealing with problems such as pushing massive amount of pixels to multiple screens, and the traditional tools would not cut it. So I turned to visual programming languages to be able to do that because of flexibility and performance, actually. Then at Nordic Media Lab company in Halden, we had a client called eSmart Systems, where a lot of quite demanding visualizations were needed. Over there, we're looking at a graph for consumption, generation, and storage marked against the movement of the sun. And that also brought me to visual programming languages to be able to do that from the data that I was getting in from engineers who were very specific about what the data should look like. Same thing for data dashboards. Because of the connectivity that I was able to get through some of these tools, I was able to inject in real time data coming from sensors, or at least simulated until we did get the data. The hard part is to actually just get that real-time connectivity. So got involved in real-time development because of that. But I am essentially a designer. I'm not here disguised as a developer, just to make that straight. But why prototype at all? I usually use a cartoon that illustrates the first point of prototyping, which is a parable about making a tree swing. This is what marketing suggested, what management approved, what was designed by engineering, what was manufactured in the end, what maintenance installed. But this is actually what the customer wanted, and this is what the customer needed. So one point that IDEO puts across is, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings. And I think if a prototype manages to create a more accurate vision of what the final product should be, then a lot has been achieved already, and it's worth the short and quick investment. So the first point about why prototype is communication. The connection between designers and developers is achieved much earlier, giving both the same work to work towards, the same goal. It helps with problem definition and redefinition, because while you're doing it, you uncover all sorts of usability issues and things that you might need to take up with developers who will be implementing it. I think it fuels ideation because it enables you to think while you're doing it, and that's a good thing because you're working in a simulated environment. That's why you prototype. Usability testing, to test as early as possible with users whether your ideas are viable and provide a good user experience. I think it helps to focus development where there's more ground needing to be covered. It helps us assess that very early. And a bit of a bonus is the fact that sometimes prototyping actually helps a lot with pitching the idea, making the project exist in the first place. So when to use it? Well, early. The thing is, the design process is less sequential than before. This is the classic loop, and any new variable that comes into play can cause uncertainty, and you might make assumptions that are dangerous and then that find their way through the development stages to the final product, which can cause problems in the end. But the thing is that static designs that we use a lot as well lack many important properties of the user experience, namely interaction per se, motion, multimedia capabilities, device connectivity, and functionality, none the least. The thing about being able to do rapid prototyping is that you can shortcut a lot of these stages. A lot of designers who are learning to use some of these tools are eager to try out new ideas very quickly. And that is a good thing, I think, because you can get very quickly to test an idea and see if it is viable. In other words, prototypes are the fastest way between you and your customers. But how to develop prototypes? I suppose in our different lines of work, we all have our different techniques. But in terms of design, there is a bit of a matrix to take into consideration, which marries functionality to visual detail. It's all about how much functionality do you want, how much visual detail. You might want all of it, but that's not always possible. So different tools have different abilities. In terms of accuracy, I would describe sort of throughout the classic design process, the level of fidelity as increasing as you go along, from sketches to wireframes to mockups to then prototypes, and then the only thing distancing prototypes from production is the finish level, really. How accurate do you need it? Well, with rapid prototyping, we're starting to compress the process. and trying to achieve a higher level of fidelity faster, short of actually developing the damn thing. But with real-time prototyping, we're mashing it up because it's all quite layered, so that we are able to really compress the process and get immediate feedback. So what is real-time prototyping, really? In my own words, which you can try to shoot down, real-time prototyping is done by using visual programming tools where compiling happens on the fly. So the tools that I'm showing in this category are always running. The results of what you're doing is always being rendered or displayed or enacted on. And within the rapid prototyping tool category, this is not an exhaustive recap, but there's many out there, going from quite static, basic, clickable screens to tools that are collaborative, tools that are layer-based, are app-based, tools that are stronger in animation, tools that are better for complex systems. It's actually very difficult to put this in a matrix and make a neat categorization. I started for this, and then I gave up. This is as best as I can group it. In terms of visual programming tools, there's a few predecessors, but in my experience, the predecessors come from actually digital audio, if some of you are familiar with it, like Pure Data and Max MSP, all authored by a chap called Miller Pouquet, who developed this visual programming environment that is actually quite able to support multiple protocols. So for me, it became a bit of a Swiss knife that I used every time I needed multiple protocol support in one. And then there's another group which is based on Quartz Composer, something that Apple developed a few years back and that hasn't received a lot of love. The people at Facebook developed something called Origami on top of it to test applications in native OS. And Vuo, also from a group of enthusiast users of Quartz Composer, is also a visual programming environment. And there's Noodle, there's TouchDesigner, which I grouped because of their IoT capabilities, but TouchDesigner is a much more multi-purpose workhorse. And then Notch and 4V, probably more aimed at insane graphic display capabilities. So you might ask, so is this for people who don't know how to code? And the answer would be, in a way, yes, because you're not coding, you're programming visually. But is it for people who don't know how to program? I would not say so, because you would get into trouble the same way you would do with any other coding language. Coming to TouchDesigner, and I must make a disclaimer, I'm not in any way affiliated to TouchDesigner makers. I just like the tool, and I know the people who make it. They're a very nice bunch of people, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a procedural architecture, so everything that you do affects a stream of data in a chain. It has great interoperability, connecting to other pieces of software. It delivers very high performance graphics capability. It's VR capable. It supports many camera sensors. And importantly as well, to mention here, it's extensible through script languages such as Python 3.5, for people who program shaders. It has GLSL 3.3. And for people who don't find in the family of operators that it provides an operator that suits their needs, they can program them in C++. It supports many protocols: MQTT, DMX, MIDI, OSC, UDP, ArtNet, WebSockets, etc. And it's available for Windows and Mac OS. One of the things that people point out at these languages is what I call the spaghetti monster effect, you start programming visually, and because you're using space, things can get messy. But then it's down to the programmer to tidy it up, because in an interface like TouchDesigner, for example, you can encapsulate your ideas and your networks, as they're called. And you can structure and make your own libraries in a way. So it doesn't need to get like this, even though the patches that I might be showing later do look a little bit like this, because I'm a messy guy. But I think the highlights or the strong points would be that it fast tracks the design process, because the speed of developing ideas is phenomenal, I think, compared to other methods. It's a good common ground, I think, for both designers and developers, because even if you have a team of designers who look at it as something a bit exotic, at least you are able to discuss how things will work, and then they will implement it in the chosen tool or language. Testing is simpler, and I think it encourages experimentation, and experimentation is an important level of creativity. So, and I think developers are extremely creative people as well, and I think there's been quite a few exciting exchanges of ideas while trying these things out. I think it also enables an early detection of any potential challenges, for example, regarding feasibility. And it's cheap because it's fast to do. It doesn't come at a very high price. So I wanted to cover, after this very quick intro, a few examples of projects where I've used visual programming languages, in particular TouchDesigner. One of them is Aker BP, an oil company, Norwegian, who needed to develop a new way to browse their insane amount of data on the Norwegian continental shelf. And this is done usually through web-based maps, but there's a lot of data that can only be visualized in 3D. And one of the major problems is actually how to find all the data, how to browse it. And maps seem like a good way of doing it, because these are geolocated assets that they have around the coast. But we need to combine it with a search, and we need to combine it with 3D capabilities. So the prototype that I'm going to show very quickly is a very low fidelity, meaning the visuals are a bit ugly. I wasn't very concerned about the visuals at this stage, but I was concerned about functionality. Regarding testing some initial user experience ideas that we had to get detailed insight on particularly the search interaction before starting to develop the logic of that search, and gain validation from stakeholders in the project of whether this was a good route to go, because it would mean some investment in the project. And then, of course, discuss ideas with developers and agree on implementation. I suppose a way to visualize it would be that we had, on one hand, 2D maps served via Mapbox, married with a 3D engine developed with Unity. And we needed to create a good user interface to enable the two. Two particular design problems that this prototype was looking at was how to go from a simple search to an assisted search, where it's already picking up what it has, which matches, which terms match the database, and from that to a cumulative search, where you keep adding tags to your search that become this and that and whatever. This is quite difficult to do in static clickable prototypes, so I resorted to TouchDesigner to try those ideas out and test them with users. The other thing that I was trying to do was to have what we called camera bookmarks, because this happens in the 3D world, and we are able to create bookmarks for any camera position. So you can create your own presentation, like a walkthrough of your own exploration of the map to reveal later. So let's have a look at the prototype then. Maybe I'll need to do like this. So here I am inside the TouchDesigner environment. I'm going to try to do this while looking sideways. Let's see how that works. I basically have a bunch of programs lined up waiting to be awakened. So I have a very rough idea. There is a map, there is a search box, there's a lot of terms. When you don't search anything, it reveals everything. I have a very sort of crude mechanism of dragging it around and adding bookmarks to what I'm doing, exploring further, zooming in and out. And I wasn't very concerned about the looks of it at this stage, but it was just to test whether I could express these ideas to a user, whether they thought it made sense. And one of the things was really the ability to search. And I couldn't afford to involve a developer at this stage. I just wanted to test the idea. So I did that in TouchDesigner because I could easily create a bunch of tables with rows of data, which would be then searchable. But it's something that you kind of build from scratch, of course. So I can search for a company and add it to a sort of available tags area here. And then it will highlight something on the map. That's all very good. And I can search for maybe something else. There's a field called Scarv. I can add it as well to the search, and it will tell me a little bit about the field called Scarv, and very good. And then we tested another idea, because this is not Unity, but it also works in 3D, and just to be able to get feedback from users of whether they thought that if looking at the seabed in a grid like this would make sense just to reveal assets. I don't remember now. Oh, here it is. Where it would make sense to pull out any of these assets to look at the geology of it as a cross-section. So we were able to collect a lot of feedback from geologists and map users and people who work with very detailed requirements in the oil business about whether this would be a good way to then have pullouts and information looking at all of these things. So the result was that, so inside you see that I have sort of encapsulated a few UI elements. I'm just going to show very quickly how this is done in case you are wondering. So I have a bunch of elements here that are my tags, and they are selecting basically from the search from a table that I created back here. So I could have a table with companies, I could have a table with facilities, and very quickly build a search. It's nothing amazing, but it's just done in minutes, and that's quite, for a designer, that's quite an appealing proposition, I would say. The end result is at the moment in pilot mode. It's been done for Windows, macOS, and iOS. And I have a little vision video that shows the interface here and there. So the idea, yes, is that all the data is stored in the cloud and then pulled in. And this is the aspect of the search. So the idea was also that you could build your own presentations through your bookmark facilities, as we call them slides, but they're mostly screen positions in the 3D space where you can add your own annotations. So there's like a presentation mode in Vision for the final product. Yes, and there's me. And then the 3D exploration mode with real geology information. So quite different from my prototype, but just to give you an idea of where we were going with this. So was it a good idea, or was it a good choice for this? I think so. I mean, the question is about using visual programming language. I think it gave us a quick way to test ideas with a functionality level that's usually not available for designers. It would require databases and screen capture management that I couldn't do in another way. It was made in one day, so that's quite a simple way of testing an idea. It enabled me to invest time where it mattered, which was the question of how to deal with search. We take search as a very matter-of-factish thing, but there's quite a lot of complexity that can go into it. And communication, because it did play an important role in discussing the feasibility of ideas with developers and other stakeholders. The other example I have to show you is a very simple project for DNVGL, where they wanted to develop a chatbot, but a chatbot with real artificial intelligence, or actually specifically machine learning ability running in the background. And this is already running as a pilot, is being served with Microsoft Azure technology. But what they didn't have was really a good design for the character. Of course, you can take one of the standard things, but they wanted to do something a bit better than that. So we wanted to develop the look and feel, something that was character based to begin with. That was the idea. We wanted to test the usability of it, gain validation from everybody involved in the project, and provide documentation for developers. So I started playing around with this character, making a few sketches of how this could look like, and went from something fairly neutral looking to something warm, and then something a bit more graphic. I suppose the inspiration for this was to marry, or like the client says, something between Cortana and Siri. I'm like, okay. So that was more or less the reason why we started playing around with these shapes and thinking of how it would behave in terms of movement and response to your own voice and to its own voice. The prototype had a code name called Vera, and I made a Vera very quickly in TouchDesigner. So let's have a look. Vera is sleeping here. Hope, yep. So we have a sort of a shape that is responsive in real time to sound. And this is something that is very easy to do in TouchDesigner. And I'm going to try to do something that is a little bit risky, because the routing of sound can get a bit funny when you come on stage and connect different things. But let's see if it goes okay. So I made, just to express to the stakeholders and developers how this could work, not only the animation and response and the way the colors and shapes deformed to the voice, but also how the dialogues could appear. So made sort of a scripted dialogue to demo this. Hello, Vera. Can you hear me? Vera, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Vera?
I can hear you.
You can't hear back there, but Could you hear a voice? Yeah. That's the risky thing about doing this on stage. But open the watertight doors, Vera.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
Have you guys seen this film? Hope so. So the prototype is basically comprised, and I've exposed the network, so it is a bit of a spaghetti monster, but I've exposed the network so that I could just show the different elements. So there is elements of sound that is being processed. The audio wave is causing the distortion of basic ellipses. And through that, I'm able to then break it down in different colors and overlap them to become the shape that you see in the renderer, which is basically, yeah, these are different stages. So there is a bit of a processing pipeline that adds dialog boxes, etc. There's my audio button. But basically, each shape has a green, there's a blue, and a yellowish shape that overlap become that sort of entity for Vera. It's not called Vera in the end, but never mind that. So I made some user testing with my son. Here he is, trying it out. So I think even a 3-year-old can be a good test subject. The design process per se, and this enabled us to basically convey the basic elements of what this entity, this character, which was a more abstract shape now, could be, and deliver them to developers and tell them these are the final colors, how it would be on idle mode, active, and peak. What would be the animation parameters, etc. So in recap, I think the real-time audio processing ability and the animation capabilities of TouchDesigner helped me do this quite fast. It was made in one day, and then not the dialogue part that took a bit longer, but the actual animation and getting the colors right was quite fast. Investing time where it mattered, which actually the look and feel of that character. And it's quite difficult to do this with static designs. How do you explain motion and behavior to anyone with just static designs? So it was a very good tool to resort to be able to do this. And communication, because it became the foundation for design specs. And actually it helped selling the idea internally so that it could actually become a pilot project. Finally, an experiment, which is a car dashboard little experiment I've done just to play around with the notion of being able to interact with graphics with external devices. And since this is an embedded, more embedded themed conference, I don't think there's anything more embedded than the software that we find in the cars today. They're becoming more and more complex, and they have quite sophisticated machinery in them and program running. So I tested something that was just an internal graphics system that could have interchangeable modes, just focusing on the speed dial, on the speedometer, as you call it. And to explore the possibilities of an integrated, fully dynamic system. The idea was to potentially connect it to sensors, actuators, real-life physical interfaces. And we all have these complicated instruments inside modern cars. So it was just to try out that idea. Here at the conference, I don't have a way to bring a steering wheel or an accelerator, but a pedal. So I brought this to be able to communicate with that patch, which is just a wireless MIDI interface that I will try to use to control it. So let's look at TouchDesigner again. I'm going to get out of this Vera patch and put it to sleep. And I think my car dashboard is here. So I just focus on that speedometer shape, which there's no graphics being loaded into it. Everything is generated internally. So every single little shape, I drew it programmatically or in a procedural way. And I just did something that is ability to switch modes from daytime to nighttime mode, and different camera positions, just to get a feel for what it will look like, to be able to separate the different layers of the that comprise this interface. So in TouchDesigner, because it supports many different protocols, of course it also supports MIDI, and I have just to check. So I have this keyboard here that is sending MIDI signals for the purpose of testing this. And then it's a matter of mapping out which MIDI signals you want to connect to what. And I think what I did is, if I had an accelerator pedal, I could speed to, let's say 180. Oh, let's break the law, 280. And I also have like a mode where this is, I'm pressing from here now. So if I had different modes on my car dashboard, I could do it from there. And the ability to change this from sort of automatic counter to sort of manual counter. And I think I put different camera positions here as well, so that I could do the same thing from this little MIDI controller. So just to test the concept of being able to interact with graphics that can be running in any kind of screen. So if I had the right conditions, I could then connect this to a instrument panel and have any sort of actuator or sensor triggering these same signals that I'm doing with a silly MIDI controller. I can do a short dive into this one just to show the spaghetti monster within. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. I mean, like you can see the numbers are being drawn and the different shapes that make the different effects. I have, let's see, I can show the final renderer at this end. Sort of any operator can be viewed as a renderer. So I have a table here, for instance, with RGB values, sort of destination and origin RGB values. I don't remember which one it is now. Is it this one? So you saw that there was a slight delay, but the delay is being applied to the numbers just to get transition effect and a smooth effect between them. So anything that I'm doing, any design aspect that I want to change, I can change it in real time. That's basically the main point. Going back to the presentation. We've looked at the prototype. I think the interesting thing about this is the inbound and outbound communication ability. To be able to do that with any type of graphics in real time is interesting for many projects. And the fact that you can have real-time generated graphics, nothing being imported in, makes it quite a good standalone system that you can take anywhere. Made it in 3 days, where I had it coupled in with different types of sensors, and just to tune in and get the animations right. And I think it has a very good level of efficiency, because once the graphics are drawn, I can control every single aspect that is on that little speedometer. Maybe a bit of a geeky thing to do, but I think it's just a proof of concept. So to wrap it up, the upsides, in my mind, for using visual programming tools is that it fast tracks the design process, because the speed is just phenomenal. I think it's a good common ground for designers and developers, even though some developers consider this to be toy programming. It's actually quite powerful. So if there is one uptake for you, if you have never used a visual programming language, is if it's being proposed by a designer, try not to roll your eyes and explore the possibility. I think testing is simpler, because you don't need to pester the developers too much before you try out things that might not work. You realize it yourself, or they might point it out for you. I think it encourages experimentation, and that's a very important element of creativity. And I think because it's cheap, it's a small investment that can yield very important results. The downside, to be perfectly honest, is there's a few that are classically pointed out. Like visual programming languages can have a steep learning curve. Discipline is needed, because you can get caught in the exploration loop. You can be exploring and experimenting forever if you're not careful, because you're just so absorbed. I suppose that happens with developers too, but at some point you need to chop it off. So some detachment is necessary. Kill your darlings and your prototypes, and move on into the real world when the stage has come. And I'm not selling the speed as everything, as the only element. Faster is not necessarily better, but it is a good resort when you just want to try out an idea. And of course, the nature of visual programming language or tools can lead to these spaghetti monsters, but that's up to. You can have messy code too, right? That is covering many more lines than needed. I think the same thing applies to visual programming languages. Wow, I managed to finish on time. Thank you. I'll be posting an article soon, so if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, it's my name, born in 73. And I think I have a colleague later on from Eggs, if you're interested in other design matters. He'll be doing a presentation for designing for consumers, succeeding with professionals. Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you able to export anything from the prototype so that you can bootstrap your development?
Yes and no. I mean, you're able to export curves. You're able to export different types of assets and rendered elements. But if I understand your question correctly, no, not like that. Not the bootstrappable way. Yes. Well, if you are aiming to integrate this into a development pipeline for real, I mean, I'm presenting this as just a test bed for ideas that you can discuss with developers, not to take materially as code. But there are products developed and running with this. But what is then done is to separate different elements, and you can have, like I mentioned, you can have Python running in it, and those can be those elements can be shared among development teams, and they can contribute. So it can be a much more Python-based network than that I showed. Yeah.
The second question is which
Anything, almost. Supports almost any, I mean, not exotic picture image formats, but it supports anything. PNGs, GIFs, PSDs, TIFFs. It's actually the object that brings in images is called movie file in, and the name is telling you that it's the same object. It doesn't care if it's an image file or a video file. So as long as it's in the supported list, and you will find that in the derivative page, the file formats that are supported. But this is, I think it's all the normal ones you would need to use. Of course, there's nobody else asking questions, so yeah.
How is it to construct elements in the tool?
Construct elements?
Like do craftsmanship of shapes and circles?
It depends on what, but like to create those little round petals that I had around the dashboard, that speedometer dial. I basically describe the shape once with actually geometries. You're just describing a geometry. You're saying, I want half a circle, only the outline, and then you invert it at the other end, and then you say connect the two, boom. And then from that, you say, I want to repeat it so many times. And even that repetition and the angle and the the number of petals that you have within the circle, is it 50, is it 30, is it 15? It's all defined programmatically after you've done that. Just to take that example.